Today's powerful tale shines a searing light on what happens when fear meets prejudice, and how love, courage, and timing can change everything in just 5 seconds. It was a bright Saturday morning in suburban Atlanta, the kind of day that carried the warmth of routine and comfort. Maya Johnson, a 32-year-old black woman with a gentle spirit and a strength honed through years of perseverance, had just stepped out of a small neighborhood cafe. The barista had smiled as she handed over her usual iced vanilla latte, and Maya had smiled back, exchanging a quick laugh about weekend plans. Clad in a neat blazer and slacks, Maya looked every inch the accomplished professional she was. An executive, a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, the kind of woman who woke up early to pack lunch for her kids, who balanced spreadsheets and bedtime stories with equal care. As she walked down the sidewalk, sunlight dancing across the pavement, she couldn't have known that someone's fear and someone else's bias were about to target her very existence. Her SUV, a gray Honda CR-V, sat in the parking lot like it did every Saturday when she came for her coffee, keys in hand. Her thoughts wandered to the kids' soccer game later, to a grocery list, to nothing in particular, until the sudden screech of tires broke the calm. A police cruiser pulled in fast. Her body stiffened, heart jumping a beat. She hadn't done anything wrong. Why would a police officer race up like that? In that moment, time didn't slow down. It cracked wide open, spilling fear where peace had been just seconds before. Before she could fully process what was happening, the officer's door flung open. A white man in uniform, hand already gripping his holstered weapon, emerged with the urgency of a man chasing danger. But there was no danger here. Just Maya, alone, still holding her coffee, eyebrows raised in confusion. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," he ordered, his voice tight, eyes sharp, and fixed on her like she was prey. The air shifted. Confused and scared, Maya instinctively raised her hand slightly, palm open, coffee cup trembling. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to make sense of what he meant. Her voice was steady, but inside, a wave of dread began to rise. "Is something wrong?" she offered gently, hoping to diffuse whatever this was. But he didn't answer, at least not in words. Instead, with terrifying speed, the officer drew his gun and leveled it at her chest. Gasps echoed from across the lot. Maya froze. Her heart thundered in her ears. She couldn't breathe. It was a surreal, split-second transformation from sipping coffee to staring down the barrel of a loaded weapon. Her life, so full just moments ago, now hung in the balance for reasons she didn't understand. Maya stood there, utterly still, her hands trembling slightly in the air, the condensation from her iced coffee slowly dripping down her wrist. Her mind was racing, but her body refused to move, frozen by the weight of the gun pointed directly at her chest. She had seen moments like this play out on the news, heard the names of women and men who were just going about their lives before being consumed by the jaws of injustice. But she never imagined it would be her. Not here. Not now. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't even holding anything but her keys and a drink. And yet, here she was, face to face with an officer whose eyes didn't see a human being, or a mother, or a professional. They only seemed to see threat. "Don't move!" he barked again, louder this time, his voice a cocktail of fear and aggression. The kind of tone that didn't leave room for misunderstanding. Maya's voice cracked as she tried to comply. "I'm not moving, I promise. Please, what did I do?" She could hear people nearby. There was a man who stopped by his car, a woman whispering into her phone. But none of them moved close. They watched. Maybe afraid, maybe unsure, maybe just stunned. Just like her. The officer inched closer, gun still raised, eyes darting to her car and back to her. He shouted over his shoulder, Tunena, into the radio clip to his vest. I've got a black female suspect at the corner of Maple and 5th, possible vehicle theft. Gray SUV, looks like a match, requesting backup. His words hit her like cold water. A suspect. Vehicle theft. It didn't make sense. My name is Maya Johnson, she wanted to scream. I work 6 days a week. I've had this car for years. My kids' booster seats are in the back. But she couldn't find those words in that moment. They were stuck beneath the lump in her throat, blocked by the knowledge that if she moved too quickly, if she reached for her ID in the glove box, her life could end on a sidewalk in broad daylight. Still holding her arms up, she tried again, more carefully this time. Officer, this is my car. My registration is inside. My ID too. Please, you can check. Do not reach for anything, he interrupted harshly. Keep your hands where I can see them. The muzzle of the gun didn't waver. Her knees weakened. Her lips quivered as she whispered, I'm not reaching, I swear. I'm just trying to explain. To him, it was all protocol, suspicion, assumption, control. To Maya, it was humiliation. It was terror. It was centuries of injustice compressed into one horrific moment that threatened to steal everything from her, her freedom, her dignity, her life. She was being told not to move, not to speak, not to exist too loudly. The weapon made it clear. She was already guilty in his eyes, and every second was a gamble with fate. All the while, the officer's voice didn't soften. He started circling her slowly, checking the license plate, squinting into the front seat, muttering updates into his radio. She remained still, too scared to look away. The disbelief etched into her face hadn't faded. She was living a nightmare, one that her mother had warned her about growing up, one that every black parent has tried to prepare their children for. Be respectful, keep your hands visible, don't argue, survive. Then came the moment that struck deeper than any shout. He asked no questions. He didn't request identification. He never asked her name. He didn't even ask why she was standing by the car. He didn't offer an explanation for his suspicion. It was as if her existence near a vehicle that happened to match a vague report was enough. The color of her skin had already filled in all the blanks for him. That was all it took for a trained officer to draw a weapon, treat her like a criminal, and summon backup. She could feel people watching. She could feel judgment and pity and fear hanging in the air around her. But nobody stepped in, nobody stopped him. In the eyes of the law, in that instant, her life had become negotiable. And then came the panic. She realized her phone was inside the car, unreachable. Her hands were up. Her voice alone would have to save her. But words often don't carry weight when a gun has already spoken louder. He paced slowly, still trying to verify something that didn't exist. He sat down, dropping the phone halfway to the floor. He paced slowly, still trying to verify something that didn't exist. No stolen vehicle alert. No confirmation from dispatch. But the weapon remained drawn. It was like he couldn't put it away, couldn't accept that he might have made a mistake, that he had turned an innocent woman into a target, and now didn't know how to reverse the damage. I'm just trying to go home, she whispered, tears forming now, blurring the edges of her vision. Please, I haven't done anything wrong. Her voice cracked again, and she hated that it did. She didn't want to sound afraid, but she was afraid. She didn't want him to see her break, but she was breaking. That's when he demanded she step away from the car again. She looked at her feet. They hadn't moved, but she shuffled slowly backward, each motion measured, cautious, deliberate. Her heels clicked against the pavement as her eyes stayed locked on the weapon. She could hear her heart thudding louder than his voice, could feel the pressure rising in her chest. She felt exposed, surrounded by people and yet completely alone. In the very place she was supposed to feel safe, she now feared for her life. The neighborhood cafe, the tree-lined street, the quiet morning, they meant nothing now. She was no longer Maya Johnson, working, mom and respected member of her community. She was a possible suspect, and the man holding the gun didn't care who she really was. And then, just like that, in the space between heartbeats, came the sound of tires screeching around the corner. A deep roar from a black Dodge Charger cut through the air, fast and sharp, pulling into the parking lot like thunder. Everyone's head turned. Even the officer's grip shifted slightly on the weapon, just for a second as the car swerved to a stop across the pavement. Doors flung open. David Johnson, Maya's husband, was out of the car before it even settled, feet pounding the pavement. His face, tight with panic and disbelief, twisted with a fear no man ever wants to feel. His wife, his heart, was standing with her hands up, and a loaded gun was pointed at her chest. He didn't stop to think. He didn't stop to calculate. But he also didn't run wild. He'd been trained. Once a U.S. Marine, always a Marine, and now a fireman. Used to keeping steady hands, even when flames were high. But nothing had ever prepared him for this. Nothing teaches you how to hold your voice steady when the woman you love is standing between a badge and a bullet. "Officer? Officer! That's my wife!" he shouted, both hands raised in the air as he moved quickly, but not recklessly, trying to get close without setting off the tension like a tripwire. "Her name is Maya Johnson. She didn't do anything!" The officer spun halfway, gun still fixed on Maya, his other hand moving to his belt. "Stay back!" he shouted at David. "This is a police matter." David didn't listen. Not because he wanted to challenge the officer, but because what he saw in that man's eyes terrified him. It was the same look he'd seen in combat, when someone's finger itches on the trigger, not because of threat, but because of fear. That kind of fear kills people who look like Maya, who look like him. "You've got the wrong person," David called again, voice cracking now, louder, more urgent. "She didn't steal anything. That's our car. I have her ID. I have proof. Please, just let me show you." The officer finally turned, glancing back and forth between Maya and David, hand still clenched on the weapon. His body was coiled, defensive, struggling to switch gears from accusation to assessment. For a moment, time stretched. The tension was a suffocating blanket, wrapped around everyone watching. Phones were up, recording, live streaming, documenting. The air felt heavy with the kind of stillness it comes right before a storm or a tragedy. David held his ground, just a few feet away now, lowering his voice. He reached slowly into his jacket, narrating every motion. "I'm reaching for her wallet. Just her wallet. Don't shoot. Please don't shoot." He pulled out her ID and the car registration, hands high. "Look, her name is Maya Johnson. This is her. That's her car. You can check it yourself. Please, officer. Please." The officer's breathing was ragged now, his face shifting between control and confusion. Slowly, he lowered the gun, but not fully. Not right away. His pride and his fear were still in the room. He took the ID and scanned it, then the registration. There was no mistake, no crime, no match with any suspect. The SUV belonged to Maya. It always had. It was legally registered, insured, and hers in every possible way. But even when the truth stood there in black and white, the damage was already in the air, thick and choking. Maya hadn't moved a step. Her arms were still in the air, her eyes were wide, red from tears she hadn't dared let fall yet. She had been holding in every sob, every scream, every ounce of panic because she knew what it meant to lose control in front of a gun. David looked at her, his strong, brave wife, and felt something in his chest splinter. He moved to her side slowly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. You're okay." But she wasn't. Not really. Not yet. Because even though the officer had holstered his weapon and mumbled something about a misunderstanding, the whole world had already watched how quickly her existence had been turned into suspicion. Nobody had apologized. Nobody had asked if she was all right. The man chimed in, angry now. "You came in hot, drew a gun on her like she was some kind of animal. You didn't even talk to her. She could have been killed." The crowd started to grow, not in chaos, but in clarity. People were no longer just bystanders. They were witnesses. They were citizens who had seen with their own eyes how a black woman, doing nothing more than going about her day, had been accused, cornered, and nearly killed because of a profile, a guess, a snap judgment. The officer looked around, realizing just how many cameras were pointed at him now. His voice was different when he spoke next. Hushed, defensive. "We got a report. A stolen vehicle, same make and model. I followed protocol. Things escalated. That's all." But nobody was nodding. Nobody was reassured. "She almost died?" Someone muttered under their breath. "Escalated?" Another repeated in disbelief. David didn't say anything. Not yet. He was still holding Maya, gently guiding her toward their car. She hadn't said a word since he arrived. Her body was stiff, her breathing shallow. All the noise around them faded into the background for a moment as he helped her sit in the passenger seat. He crouched in front of her, held her hands, Kay. Held her hands, Kay, the back of them. She finally let the first tear fall. David turned then, slowly, to face the officer again. His eyes were steel now, not wild, not hostile, but clear and deliberate. "You had your gun pointed at my wife's chest," he said, voice low but cutting. "You didn't even ask who she was. Didn't ask for ID. Didn't ask a single question. You saw a black woman near a car and made a decision. That decision could have ended her life. You were wrong, but being wrong with a badge and a weapon, that doesn't just go away." The officer didn't reply. He looked down, then at the people still recording, then at his car. His face held no apology, only the unease of a man realizing too late that his actions had consequences he couldn't control now. Maya watched it all from the car, her breath slowly returning, though each inhale still rattled like wind against cracked glass. Her world had tilted, cracked at the foundation. The parking lot was no longer familiar. The cafe, once her quiet morning ritual, now felt foreign and unsafe. Nothing would feel the same again. The image of the gun, the sound of the officers shouting, the way he looked at her like she didn't belong, all of it etched itself into her memory in sharp, unshakable detail. A siren was heard in the distance, backup, finally arriving long after the damage had already been done. A second cruiser pulled in. Another officer stepped out, looked around, took in the scene. The first officer spoke with him, clearly trying to explain, control the narrative. But the crowd wasn't quiet anymore. People were speaking loudly, pointing at the cameras, repeating what they saw. This wasn't going to disappear quietly. David stood back and let them speak. He stayed close to Maya, one hand resting on her shoulder, the other still holding her ID. He could feel her shaking under his fingers, the quiet tremor of someone who had kept it together too long, who now had no more strength to hide the impact of what had just happened. And still, the officer never said the words, "I'm sorry." Not once. Not to her, not to him, not to the crowd. Because maybe in his mind, he thought he did his job. Maybe he still believed he followed protocol. But David knew, Maya knew, and everyone watching knew. This wasn't protocol. This was profiling. This was bias with a badge. This was fear masquerading as authority. And it was almost lethal. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, finally whispering to David, "He didn't even ask my name," herself in the wrong gaze. David stood beside the open car door, a protective silhouette against the chaos still unraveling behind them. He wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. People were still talking. Cameras were still rolling. The second officer, who had arrived after everything had already happened, was now walking around trying to collect statements, but nobody was letting it go. The tension in the air wasn't dissipating. It was evolving from fear to outrage, from disbelief to resolve. People who had never met Maya before now surrounded the officer with firm voices and louder questions. Why didn't you ask for her ID first? Why did you draw your weapon before you even talked to her? Would you have done that if she were white? But the officer gave no answers. His silence said everything. David finally looked at him again, and this time, his voice was filled with something more than fear or anger. It was grief. "You could have killed her," he said, barely above a whisper, but the crowd went quiet enough to hear it. "You had your finger on the trigger. For what? For a hunch?" He didn't wait for an answer. He didn't need one. The officer's eyes didn't hold remorse, only discomfort, and that, more than anything, told David the truth. This man wasn't sorry. He was just afraid of the consequences now, that people were watching. Maya turned her face slowly toward the open window, her voice soft but heavy, like a crack in something once whole. "I had coffee in my hand," she said, her eyes locked on the officer, though her words were more for everyone around her. "I was going to pick up groceries, and in 5 seconds I had a gun in my face. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask me my name. He didn't see me." A woman in the crowd, eyes glassy and voice trembling with fury, shouted out, "You didn't see any of her. All you saw was black." The truth echoed, sharp and raw. Another bystander stepped forward, an older man dressed in a church suit, his hands clenched at his sides. "We keep saying not again, but it's always again," he said quietly. "She could have been my daughter. She could have been my wife. I don't care what the report said. You don't pull a gun on someone who's not doing anything. You talk. You talk first." The young woman next to him added, "But talking requires believing we're human." She looked straight at the officer, voice fierce and steady. "That's the problem, isn't it? You don't believe we are." And still, no apology. As backup officers started to push through the small crowd, trying to get people to step back, David stepped in again, his frame tall and unwavering. "Don't try to clear the scene," he said. "This is our neighborhood. These are our people, and you almost took one of us." His words weren't shouted, but they struck deeper because of how calm they were. It was the calm of a man who had seen too much, who knew what grief looked like because he'd prepared himself to live it. Then, suddenly, a small voice rose from the side of the parking lot. "Mommy?" Everyone turned. A child, 8 years old, maybe 9, stood next to a minivan, holding the hand of an older woman who looked like Maya's mother. The child had tears on her cheeks, big brown eyes wide and frightened. She had arrived late, unaware of what had just occurred, but she could feel the fear vibrating off the adults. Maya's whole body flinched at the sound of her daughter's voice. She looked up, eyes filling again. She stepped out of the car as if walking on shards of glass, legs numb, breath trembling. The child ran into her arms and held her tight. "I saw the police cars," the girl whispered. "They said someone had a gun. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought something bad happened to you." Maya knelt to the ground, holding her daughter against her chest, kissing her curls, whispering, "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay." But she wasn't. Not inside. Not anymore. Because her child, this little girl, so full of light, had now seen what the world did to people who looked like her mother. She had felt that dread, that helplessness, and that kind of pain, once it enters a child, never really leaves. David crouched beside them, his arms around both of them now. The three of them, grounded in each other, forming a circle against everything that had tried to shatter them. Around them, the noise of sirens and radios faded for a moment. Only the sound of Maya's quiet weeping, the child's trembling breath, and David's steady heartbeat filled the space between them. The crowd didn't scatter. They stayed. They bore witness because silence had become complicity, and everyone there understood what nearly happened, what could have happened, what has happened to too many before. Maya's daughter clung to her tighter, and Maya held on like she'd never let go again. Not because she was safe, but because safety had become a question mark, a fragile, breakable thing that could be lost in 5 seconds of someone else's assumption. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind rooftops and the sky turned to bruised shades of purple and blue, Maya sat curled on the living room couch, her daughter asleep beside her, clutching a stuffed bear like a shield. David stood in the kitchen, his hand resting on the countertop, staring into nothing. The house was quiet, too quiet, yet everything still echoed. The shouts, the sirens, the terrifying silence when that gun was drawn. Maya's phone buzzed with messages, news clips, and videos from bystanders. The incident had gone viral. Across the country, people were now saying her name, some in outrage, some in solidarity. But Maya didn't feel like a symbol. She felt broken, like she had to explain to her daughter why people who are supposed to protect you can be the same ones who see you as a threat. Why your skin can speak louder than your voice. David walked over, knelt beside her, and took her hand. Neither of them said a word. There was no comfort big enough to carry what the day had taken from them. The next morning, they stood side by side at a community press gathering on the steps of City Hall. Maya spoke, her voice shaking but sure, telling the world what had happened, not just the facts, but the feelings, the fear, the near finality of it, she said. Her daughter asked her last night, "Mommy, will a police officer hurt me too one day?" And Maya couldn't promise her it would never happen. The crowd went silent. Her words hit like thunder. David stood beside her, his presence steady, his arms crossed over a heart that had almost been broken. The officer who pointed the gun hadn't been fired. Not yet. But the pressure was growing. Protests were planned, and complaints were filed. A movement began in their city, not sparked by statistics or slogans, but by the image of one black woman with her hands up and a barrel inches from her life. Maya didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to live. From the trembling breath of a mother staring down the barrel of a gun, to the silent scream of a child fearing she'll lose the world she calls mommy. This story lays bare the razor-thin edge between justice and assumption, This story, Maya Johnson did everything right. She followed the rules. She spoke respectfully. She complied with grace under pressure that would crumble most. And still, none of it mattered. Because the only thing louder than her words that day was the color of her skin. This is A1 Storyteller, where the truth gets told and justice finds its voice. If Maya's story moved you, don't just watch, act.